Folks, welcome to an episode of the Artenders with Mac and Dan. I am Dan, he is Mac.
Howdy.
This is a wonderful art review podcast where we review all forms of art, movies, TV shows, music, albums, video games, perhaps books one day too. And this is in an effort...
Why have we not done a book yet?
I don't know, we just haven't. But this is in an effort to, keep ourselves as artists working. It's a totally selfish podcast, but, whatever the hell. And we try to make it at least somewhat entertaining for everybody. Is it not?
I mean, it's mostly selfish, but at the same time, it is. We are learning at the same pace that the audience is learning. We would like for them to learn the things that we're learning.
That's true. And so then, through the efforts of this show, we try to, talk out our thoughts and our experiences.
Which is a selfish thing. Yes.
For sure.
You're
yes.
Correct. You're
yeah.
correct.
Screw any other opinion. We only care about this bubble that we're living in.
Oh, man.
And speaking of this bubble that we're living in and completely selfish thoughts, I made a completely selfish pick for us to consume this time.
You did.
This time, we are reviewing an original... wow.
Oh, no.
I combined words.
Hit him on the front end, Danny.
An original musical event soundtrack called The Big Game. Now, the reason why we are doing The Big Game is because, for years and years, I've been listening to the Dan LEBATARD show with STUGOTZ. They were a radio show on ESPN, formerly, for the longest time. Eventually, they left ESPN last year, and essentially they have their own podcast network, and they're still going strong and doing their own thing, and are a part of DraftKings now. It's a whole thing, right? So,
an empire, for sure. They are fantastic.
And they're building this empire as we speak, right? And
Geniuses.
So, a few weeks after the Super Bowl in the year of our Lord 2022... they, I kid you not, put together a musical soundtrack, essentially, which is 11 songs, 33 minutes long in total, that you can listen to on Apple Music, Spotify, whatever. But I have a lot of love for this particular podcast, the Dan LEBATARD Show with STUGOTZ, because a big reason, Mac, as to why I really wanted to start this podcast was because of how much I enjoyed listening to them. And I was like, these are individuals who seem to love what they're doing, care a lot about what they're doing, and have a blast doing it. And I wanted to put myself artistically forward into something that I cared a lot about and would have a good time doing it. Hence why, we both came up to each other and was like, let's start a podcast. And that was like the big sort of, governor that was, pushing me forward when it comes to starting this whole shindig.
Well, I feel like there were really two key moments in us starting a podcast, for sure. And that we never really talked about this on the show. That's
not really.
Yeah, okay, so I mean, the big two moments in my mind, and you tell me if you have any others, were the first one is me and you were in the car driving on the highway one day, and I'm talking to this new girl who is still my current girlfriend, Emma, and I'm talking to this new girl at the time, years ago. And this new gal, and I am like, hey, could I send something to her real quick? And we make a voice memo that's like 8 minutes long or something.
Of just pure content.
It felt like it wasn't all filler, but it was relatively entertaining. And not only did she share it with all of her family and friends and everything, but that became such a thing.
We knew from then on there that we had the goods. We got the goods.
We can definitely entertain for as long as we need.
And was the second reason that it was in the middle of the pandemic and we were bored out of our minds?
No, I think that's definitely threw us into it 100%. But I was actually thinking of the Dan LEBATARD show whenever me and you and Emma went to Disney World.
That's right. That's a big thing. So Mac and I went to college together in Dallas, and during our junior year, me and him, as well as his girlfriend, yes, I was third wheeling, or she was third wheeling, or maybe Mac was third wheeling.
I think I was third wheeling.
Perhaps, yeah. Well, Emma and I had a great time. We had a blast. But so whenever I would drive the car, I would force them to listen to this podcast because that is how I would stay awake. It wasn't through music. It was through podcast.
How many hours straight do you think we listened to Dan LEBATARD?
There was one, when we were driving back, I drove for 8 hours, and so we listened to 8 hours straight of the Dan LEBATARD show with STUGOTZ.
I love that. I think a collective 13, maybe.
So let's get into this bad
So
boy.
let's do it.
So, you don't consume this show the same way that I do, right?
You're
This
right.
is a musical soundtrack album thing that's mostly about, right, the Super Bowl, right, that just occurred
Yeah.
this year, 2022, with the Rams, the Los Angeles Rams against Cincinnati Bengals, right?
Right.
And part of it too, as well as the the NFL and the season as a whole as well. So this is definitely the first time you heard of this and you listened to this,
Without a doubt.
Mac.
Without a doubt.
So I mean, and you don't have as much of an affinity for the show as well. So I'm very interested to hear your thoughts, with a much more naked eye as opposed to mine. Like, what were your impressions of this? Because this is not like any musical soundtrack, period.
Right, true. I would say that I really had a struggle on the drive over here today, thinking to myself, okay, am I going to be as blunt and as honest and straightforward as I want to be? I was like, well, I think the audience deserves it.
Oh, wow.
Like, I should be. I should be as honest as I can possibly be.
I'm terrified.
And and so here's my honest opinion. I hated it.
Wow.
So much.
Oh, wow.
I genuinely
Hold on.
thought it was
This is
awful.
great news for the show. As much as it pains my heart, this is fantastic news for the show.
Because you loved it.
I think this is the first time ever in
Yeah.
the show where I have really enjoyed something and you...
Yeah.
And you despised it,
Yeah,
but like...
there have been quite a few times where I've loved something and you've hated it, and there's been plenty of times whenever we've agreed on things.
Yeah.
But
And this isn't like a folklore case where
Right.
it's just like, at least, or like a Korra case where it felt like I was able to talk you a little bit more into my side.
Right.
No, I think the sense that I'm gleaning is that you just straight up hate this.
100%.
And this is something that I showed as well.
I'm sorry. I love Dan LEBATARD. Love STUGOTZ. Love the show. Love the podcast. This specific
Wow.
thing, it's so far away
Let's
from
get
me.
into that.
Okay.
Let's get into that. Why do you
So,
hate this?
For quite a few reasons. The first one being this. It made me uncomfortable
Okay.
several times because it felt like it kind of a little bit took itself too seriously. I wish that they hadn't produced it as much, and I wish there were more punchlines. It was difficult for me because I was trying to figure out the entire time, are they being serious? Because every time that I was like, no, they can't be. I would listen a little further and I'd be like, I think they're being serious about this, because they would auto-tune people's voices to make them
because nobody can sing. So what they're doing
Right.
is that they're using the members and the producers
Right.
and everybody from the podcast, from the show.
Right.
None of them are professional singers.
Yeah, not at all. But I think that's when I think you either get professional singers, or if you want to have the people, don't auto-tune them. Make it bad.
Gotcha.
Lean into
So
it.
you thought it was overproduced.
I thought it was well overproduced. This is the thing. I thought it didn't know what production was supposed to be. If it was supposed to be serious, it was drastically underproduced. If it was supposed to be funny, it was drastically overproduced. And that back and forth made me kind of cringe sometimes, because I'd be like, "Oh, this is funny," and then it would feel like it was trying too hard, and I was like, no. And it just didn't feel like the show. It didn't feel like their show. Does that make any sense? Or what I
think
remember
so.
of the show.
In some capacity. Sure, it feels
Yeah.
like maybe an extension of it, but I see what you're saying.
Right.
I do think it's very interesting because I felt that the overproduction, right? It's definitely overproduced, right?
But you thought that
I
was the
think-
funny part?
I thought that was funny.
Sure.
Because at least for me, my expectations were at the ground.
Right.
Because in my mind, I'm like, there's no way this can be good.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So I actually thought the
yeah.
overproduction was to the benefit of the quality
I
of
think
it.
this is another huge important part of it, as a listener.
Yeah.
Were you able to make out who was singing when?
Here and there, for the most part.
Right.
Yes, and
I think that changes a lot.
okay.
That your experience and your understanding of the characters of the show, you could track them. So whenever they start singing and
It's this guy.
it breaks your expectations or
Yeah.
something, because it's not necessarily that you thought that it was going to be bad because the show is bad or whatever. It's because you were like, none of these people are singers and there's no way they can pull it off.
Yeah.
And so whenever you're like, oh, okay, well they got this person to sing, but there's no way that Stu's gonna sound good.
Exactly.
And then
And then he has a whole
okay.
song for himself that
Right.
it's like a ballad.
And that's I see why that's funny. It was so in between for me that I was like, what? it was also difficult because I was trying really, really hard to, uh,
Yeah.
I don't know, because it wasn't necessarily like it wasn't very punchliney. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm with you there.
the jokes of the songs were the song itself was like the entirety of the song, not specific things they said in the song.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So, I mean, the best example, right, is I believe it's called Discordant Harmony Number 2, where it's essentially STUGOTZ's song. Oh, excuse me, in B minor. It's STUGOTZ. That's what the pound symbol means, right?
Oh,
in music terms.
No.
Oh, it's not minor.
The pound symbol means sharp, so in B sharp.
Oh, it's B sharp. Thank you.
Minor has a lowercase m.
Thank God. Okay. Whoo! I'm happy that I figured that out. See, I know nothing about music.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, I was
good.
like, I doubted myself. I totally
forgot. I'm glad. I'm glad you brought it up.
The idea of that song, right, where it's just STUGOTZ singing in pain, the Jets, right?
Yeah, right.
That's hilarious.
Right.
But there's no like punchline.
Right.
In it,
yeah.
The punchline is just the
Jets.
act of it. It's just the entire thing in and of itself, right?
And there were quite a few like football jokes that I was like, okay, sure, that's kind of funny. But like, you know, they start singing the GOAT, right? And it's about Tom Brady mostly and everything,
Yes.
and they're talking about him and everything. But I feel like there's a lot of Tom Brady punchlines they could have made but they like actually pretty earnestly talked about like had a discussion about Tom Brady and his standing as the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I guess, but like I'm waiting.
I see, because there weren't a lot of punchlines, right? There was one at the very end of the song, "The Playoffs," right, where like they're talking about the greatest of all time, and then all of a sudden they blurt out Evan McPherson, which is the kicker for the Bengals. That's hilarious. Very funny.
Yeah, and I think the problem for me is that there were so many times where I was about to laugh or where they set me up for a laugh, and you know that inhale before the release, before the laughter,
yes,
where I'm like, okay, and then there's never a relief, because there's never like for sure this is where you should laugh.
Yeah.
So that was a little weird for me, and then I think the biggest thing for me, other than the seriousness piece,
right,
is that it bothered me to no end that they called it a musical, but the way that they handled the genres from song to song was like so oppositional to that.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay. And it drove me insane because I kept thinking to myself, and we're going to have to get back into this, and you can ask your question after this. Who the hell's your audience here? Like, who is this made for, really? Other than, like, people that just love Dan LEBATARD, which I understand why that person should listen to this, which is why it's totally not an F tier for me.
Jesus Christ.
It's not at all. It's not.
Well, I mean, I'm happy that's not the bottom rung of the freaking ladder.
Yeah, no.
Christ
well, because
almighty.
we've talked before about, like, the definition of an F tier is who would watch this? No one should. And I definitely think there are people that would like this. Okay. 100%. I can accept that.
Yes.
But you were about to ask a question?
Well, I mean, in terms of the genres, right? The switching of the genres, sure. I don't have a problem with that. I think it definitely gives the whole thing more character. I think what definitely shoots itself in the foot, and I think we're definitely going to get into this much more later, is the fact that there isn't really a protagonist.
Yeah.
And then the through line, there's a through line between songs, but there's not a through line in story.
Right.
Which is I think to not the benefit, right? It's more of an album than it is a musical.
I was about to say the exact same words, Danny.
So you're doing it's a little bit like doing itself a disservice when it's advertising itself as original musical event soundtrack.
Right. That's a huge issue.
That
there.
It's perfectly fine that it's like it's not from a stage production and then they've recorded the songs from the stage production.
Well, there are also I don't know how much you know about radio musicals. Radio musicals are like they are formal musicals and everything, but they're meant to be listened to. There are a bunch of them, and they're very, very, very good. It's a really cool little art form that we might dive into someday. But they should have taken a lot of inspiration from radio musicals, which there are 30-minute radio musicals just like this. But the difference is that, like you said, it's a musical because there's a story.
Yeah.
That's the point. But here there absolutely was none.
Yeah, and so like there's some like thoughts throughout it that are visited and stuff, but what it felt like more was a sort of like collage of different ideas and different songs.
Right.
And so then that's what I think made the like switching of the genres so clear, right? So painstakingly obvious that the genres are switching because there isn't a through line in narrative, right? There's a through line with like the fact of, they talk about the playoffs later on, and then eventually they talk about how the Super Bowl will be in LA, right? Like there's some through line there, but I think, mind you, like it's impressive to consider, right? And I think it's both important to consider this and important to acknowledge that you shouldn't have this be the total acknowledgement. It being that that didn't make sense, but it won't after I say this.
But go ahead.
This whole thing was written and produced in 2 weeks. That's really freaking impressive, right? Those are 11 songs put together in this capacity.
Yeah.
Put together in 2 weeks. Amazing.
Yeah.
However, it's still going to suffer from like the lack of the through line of everything, where I felt like there should have been A, more songs, B, a more cohesive story, and C, have like a distinct first and second act.
Right.
The first act being about perhaps like the regular season, right?
Sure.
And then have, the end of the first act be like the start of the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
And then have the entirety of the second act be about the playoffs, and then like 2 or 3 songs be just about the Super Bowl.
Right. So I another thing that really got to me is that even if you're not going to go with like there's an actual protagonist and there's a clear storyline.
And I want to say also that we're critiquing this from the viewpoint of it being a musical.
Right. Like we're aware of what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I still had a good time for the most part.
And like if it just called itself an album, or if it didn't have that tagline,
then that
I
would
don't
be
think we would be saying any of this right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, and also it would be a lot funnier, I think. But also one of the songs that had the most potential and that I loved the idea of it, but I hated the execution of it was and you might actually have to help me out on this one. What was the song where they had a direct definition of like what a musical is and why they are making
New American Pathos?
Yes,
the interlude.
Yes, correct.
With a Juju Gotti.
That's exactly right. Yes,
just sort of narrating the beginning of musicals and the beginning of football.
That is so funny, and I really that was maybe the only song that I had an actually good time listening to it. But yet again, like I said, it was difficult for me because I was like, there's so much missed opportunity there. I feel like this is where you should have introduced like a character of some sort, someone that we're supposed to be following.
Yeah.
That like there was a lot of, I don't know. I guess that was the very first time that I realized like, oh, they don't care about like structure at all. Like they're not here to make anything good. And
whoa, okay, hold on. Wow, hold on.
Well, no, I mean something at least that we can follow along with. You know what I mean?
Sure. But just the way you said that.
I know.
I don't think they're here to make anything good.
Sorry.
So aggressive.
I mean something that is thought out. You know what I mean?
No. Thought out in terms of the cohesion of the entire narrative.
Yeah. So, I mean, for instance, let's look at other comedy musicals that I think that they could have ripped off and totally gotten away with it.
Yeah.
One of the most famous comedy musicals of all time, Book of Mormon. You heard of it?
Yes, I've heard of Book of Mormon.
Making sure.
Never listened to it because I don't listen to musicals.
Right. Right. So, Book of Mormon was written by Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
The creators of South Park.
You're correct, absolutely. And the thing that is so funny about the Book of Mormon and that crushed everyone's expectations is exactly what should have happened here, which is, oh my God, this is really good. And like every time that like they say a punchline, which makes you laugh, and then they actually do like they actually pull at your heartstrings a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious because it's like they keep making fun of you. They keep being like, here's a character. You care about this character, don't you? You audience member, you love this character, you dummy. We got you, you dummy. And that's really clever. I think there's a lot of moments in which they could have made this really spectacular, and they chose actively not to. Even if they didn't have a character, even if they didn't have a character that we were following, like a protagonist of some sort, I think they at least, at minimum, should have had motifs or like something that held all the songs together. Not in terms of like content, but I'm talking just the sound.
Because all the songs flowed one into the other.
Sure, but and I'm okay with the different songs
and
having
very smooth transitions
yeah,
as well.
Yeah, and I'm okay with different songs having different genres. I'm okay with that. It's just, can they have anything to do with each other at all? Like, it's so herky jerky
because it is just about football, right? And then towards
Sure.
the end, it is about the Super Bowl. But I think I'm with you there that there doesn't seem to be some sort of purveying theme about it. I also want to say I think I want to walk back my take of I think there are plenty of punchlines within songs, but they're hard to get because I think a good amount of those punchlines are inside jokes. And part of it too is just like when you listen to anything for the first time, you're not going to get everything.
Sure.
And so like one of my favorite parts in the song Take Me There is like towards the end of the song when Jessica is like, my team's not there, but I'm gonna go, and then Chris Whittingham is also like, my team's also not there, but I'm gonna go. And so like but how that coalesces
Sure.
one another. But that's just one very specific example. What I'm trying to say is that I think there are plenty of jokes, punchlines within songs, but I think they focus more on trying to make it good than trying to make it funny.
I see. Yeah.
And so they try to make it good first and then added the funny where they could.
Right.
And I imagine that was not to the benefit of you and your experience.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that the most difficult part for me personally is that it was not this was not composed and recorded. This was produced. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like the sound was a sound made by a producer, not by a
JT Daly.
Oh,
is the producer.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Not by a like composer, sound mixer. It's like specifically a person that like he it was okay, and this kind of gets into my next part, that the genres were all over the place, right? And I wish that they were something specific, or at least they were a specific choice. You know what I mean? Like they aided the listening experience in some way, but it just felt like, what fits, like what is this person who's singing the song like the most, or whatever. I have no idea. But in terms of genre, the thing that kept getting me is I was like, who is this being made for?
That I'm with you there. I was having that thought experience today and yesterday where I largely enjoy it because I listen to the podcast. But the thing is, people who listen to musicals aren't going to care about it because of the lack of this, like the cohesion of the story, right?
And also the fact that like it doesn't really have a musical sound ever.
Yeah.
There's never a point where it sounds like a musical.
And I mean, of course, for me, because I have my own prism, like I think that's fine. But
right.
nevertheless,
honestly, I'm okay with that as well. There are plenty of musicals that are great that don't sound like musicals.
Right. But then there's also like, okay, so then is this for like a football fan? But then why would they listen to this is the thing.
And I think they would listen to it if it wasn't like mostly pop, sometimes like edging into hyper pop, like this like very produced like Boots and Cats type song where I'm like,
you hate how produced this is.
Yeah, but it's not even just the fact that it is. It's more like this sound does not match this audience.
I want to pick at something. I want to pick at something in particular about this. So is it actually the production of it, like the actual production of it, that you do not like, or is it that the production of it just doesn't work with everything else that it's trying to do?
Yeah.
Okay, it's that because the production by itself is well done, right? Is that fair to say? Oh, it's a yes.
Yeah, all. Yeah.
Okay.
It's I think all of it that's really frustrating to me. It's that the actual production of it was very rushed, which again, like I said, would be okay if their priority was the comedy, or like making it as punchliney as possible. But because that they went for the production route, I'm then left to question to myself, okay, who likes this sound? Like, who's going to be listening to this sound because they actually think the song is good? Because if you're trying to make a good song, who are you going to be giving this good song to? And the best thing I come up with was like, I don't know. It's like what genre, or not genre, but like what era do you think of people would listen to this? What does this remind you of the most, like in terms of actual artists in the real world?
Oh, I mean, I would say like people close to our era, like people closer to our age would at least enjoy this more, right? It's
Sure.
definitely 2010s, 2020s, like era
it's definitely
style,
early
right?
2010s.
I mean, like still, then you have something like Back in My Day, which is supposed to be more like vaudevillian, right? But that's like the point of it. But for the most
Right.
part, like it is like
it's kind of
like electro rock
right
here and there, pop.
Maybe a little bit of, this might sound ridiculous, but maybe a little bit of like LMFAO sometimes.
Ish.
Yeah,
I see what
sometimes.
you're saying. I don't necessarily agree, but
Right.
I understand what you're trying to get at.
But you see that like the people that would listen to that, I don't think would necessarily get the jokes here, but the people that would get the jokes here would not listen to this.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they should have gone for maybe, like you said, maybe more of like a like rock opera or like rock musical type of sound. Do you know what I mean?
I think what I'm trying to what I'm understanding
Yeah.
right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's such little cohesion. And I keep bringing up this word because I think this word is really, really relevant to the point of like,
I agree.
this is supposed to be a musical, yeah?
Yeah.
And so like, it feels like if it had a cohesion and narrative, then you could excuse like the lack of cohesion with the genres. If there's a cohesion
Right.
of genres, then you could better excuse the lack of cohesion in the
Right.
narrative. So it just feels like a bunch of disjointed songs that, even though have transitions, they aren't tied together in any way except for the fact of it's this group of people that they're singing about football.
Yeah, right.
You know, and then you may have like STUGOTZ in a later song, like, you know, have a short line about the Jets again. But I mean, Greg Cody, you know, sings Back in My Day, and he never reappears. You know,
Right.
Like once again, like Dan, who does Nothing Stops Football, will do a line at the very end, reprise, right? The big game
Yeah.
/ reprise, right? But there's nothing that really brings it all thematically together.
Sure. And I think that you've heard songs from Rent before.
Sure.
Yeah. I think if this sounded like Rent, I would not be talking about any of this right now. Yeah. And I don't, like, story aside, because I honestly, whenever I started listening to it, I kind of figured there wouldn't be any sort of story or anything like that.
No,
So
I mean, I
trying
showed
to-
this to my girlfriend, and she was like, "Who's the protagonist?" And I was like,
You listened to the wrong thing. And you just paused it. You said, okay, we're going to restart this. Change your expectations.
Yes.
Yeah. No, and I totally understand that.
Remember when I told you this was a musical? I guess I'm wrong.
Yeah, don't think about it like that. Whenever we come back, I want to make sure that we dive into the positives, obviously.
Yes.
Duh. Also, I want to, because you're talking about like maybe making a little bit of a game out of it, like what would we have done, or how would we change this? How would we try? And if we were in the writers' room whenever they were doing this, what would we do differently, or how would we stage this?
How would we stage this?
And that is a great question that I want to get into after a word from our sponsor. All right, welcome back, folks. So I just wanted to start this bad boy off by saying I apologize to you, Danny, because I may have gone into this whole process with the assumption that you also did not like this piece.
You made an ass out of you and me.
That's true. That's exactly right. And I just, I should not have thought that. And I apologize. And I want to apologize by, in this segment, getting into the lighter side of things, the more positive side of things, the things that we liked, our favorite jokes, the memories we made along the way, Danny. So from your perspective, what were some of your favorite songs, specifically favorite jokes or moments that really landed?
First of all, gold medal, Take Me There. I thought legitimately, it's it's my favorite. It's my favorite because I really enjoyed listening to it.
And I understand that.
Yeah, and I can imagine, it's one of those things that, like, for most of these songs, I do envision in my head, I'm like, what if people who could sing better, and I don't mean this as an offense to, the people performing this, what if people who could sing better were doing these songs? And I thought Take Me There was the best example of that, of, like, I think it's a really well-written and, like, surprisingly kind of beautiful song.
Yeah.
And really, really fun, especially when you have the chorus, all the harmonies together. It's legitimately gorgeous stuff.
True.
And I remember the first time listening to it, it
That's true.
sent chills down my spine.
Yeah.
And I was really, really impressed by that. I think there are definitely like fun moments in a lot of the songs. I really enjoyed the idea, for example, of like back in my day of just I like to envision an old guy with a cane and a bowler hat, just sort of like dancing around and stuff,
Right.
you know. But like I guess I was really impressed by the transitions of it all, and I think that is, you know, if you were to do a production of this, that is what's going to kill you in the end, I think. But I think the production of the transitions were really, really well
You
done.
think transitions are going to kill you?
Between the songs.
I see.
Here's the okay. Well, do you want to get into this now, or do you want to talk about what you liked about this first? I think we should talk about what you liked about this first.
Yeah. Before we dive. Yeah.
Listen, but the point is, I think like a lot of the group songs and the harmonies were actually pretty freaking good. Okay, okay.
No, I would agree.
I was trying to read your face.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was really just trying to think through the songs for a second, but yeah, no, I would say so. I would say that yeah, definitely the chords they picked as well as the way they executed that and everything was fun for sure.
Yeah. Listen, it may be overproduced. I find that to be kind of the funny part, as well as I think it's also pretty good, you know? And so I think that's even the funnier part. I think it's funny to me that it is even remotely in the sense of good. I know you disagree.
Sure.
But that's what I actually find kind of enjoyable about it. And once again, I had no expectations.
Uh-huh.
And because I don't care about musicals, I wasn't occupied with the thought of who's the protagonist.
Right.
That didn't even cross my mind. And so I was definitely, when I was listening to it the first time, I wasn't thinking of it as a musical. I was thinking of it as an album, and I think that's probably a big difference, you know. What did you, if any, let's admit it. Okay, but what did you enjoy most about it? Did you have a favorite song? Do you have a gold medal?
My absolute gold medal by a landslide has to be New American Pathos. Yeah. I thought that was
the spoken word.
It was sort of really, really funny for me. I think partially because it was the main song that was self-aware. Like, it really took itself for what it was. And I think it was because the humor that I was expecting and was hoping was going to be in the musical, I think was best exemplified through that song.
Yeah.
And
I mean, like him saying Andrew Lloyd Webber changed my life.
Was hilarious. Yeah, or like talking another character into, while talking the audience into this idea of like just the fact that they're doing this musical thing at all, I thought was really clever and was super funny. That made a lot of sense to me. I would probably keep that 100%. I think you have to in order to buy your audience in, especially the type of people that are going to be listening to this.
What I want to credit as well for a lot of the lyricism of this entire piece is such great, fantastic imagery.
True.
The imagery, I think, is brilliant, and what was nice is that, like, for the most part, I was able to, like, see this, right? Like, not just in the listening to it, but I was able to see this unfurl, right? When you listen to a lot of songs, like, you don't have this narrative, not necessarily narrative imagery, but I don't know, there's something about listening to this entire soundtrack, and like it's very clear the images that do pop up, and maybe because like a lot of the images are like real people or like actual events or something, or like, I mean, you have at the very beginning of the final song where you have Ron McGill, who is a zoologist, right? And he's detailing like a battle between a ram and a Bengal, you know?
That's true.
And like, what are the benefits of each of those animals, you know?
Right.
And so like, that is so painstakingly clear. And I don't know, I think that's something to be said. At the very least, which something to be said is basically me saying nothing. I'm saying nothing. I'm saying nothing when I'm saying that's something to be said. But I think
it was good.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. There we go. The show, I think, Sorry. Okay. Sorry.
Well done.
I know.
I mean, listen, I was
Backtrack.
I mean, I was drowning out there in my
I
own
know,
little
I
words,
suck.
but there was something about like you drowning out in silence, and I'm like, come on.
That's
Come on.
even
the
worse.
Thing. Like, I
should
drown
be
out by
saying,
talking a bunch. You drown out by just not saying anything at all.
Right. You're right. So
Yin and yang.
Okay. So I think that the big no. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
I deserved it. Now, Danny, what you're talking about with this the separation of experiences, I think, comes from the fact that whenever you're listening to it, you're saying that you have images in your mind, right?
Yeah.
Now, those images, are they just like random scattered all over the place, or are you seeing this like on a stage or on a screen?
I'm seeing this on a stage.
You are really? Wow. Okay.
For parts of it.
Okay.
Right. And so, I mean, something as simple as the line of like Chris Collinsworth sliding into your screen. I'm imagining somebody in a chair and like literally just like sliding across the stage.
Sure.
Something
okay.
as like simple as that.
Right.
Or like something as simple as like back in my day at the end of the song, like Greg Cody is being pulled by a giant cane, like slowly off the stage, or Discordant Harmony number 2, where you have just a solo spot on STUGOTZ, right? Those are the sort of like images that pop into my head, right? Or parts of the song, like there's one part of the song LA where I think they're all saying like they're gonna take shots or something.
Yes.
And so I can imagine like all of a sudden a table is put up and everybody takes shots, and then Amin, who's the one that says, I'm incredibly fucked up right now. It's just like all these like asides, like all these characters interacting at once, right? It's this like moving sort of sphere, a cacophony, if you will, of human bodies. And then there's also at the beginning of the final song, like I said, with the ram and the Bengal facing off against each other, I'm imagining that entire thing in like crazy slow-mo, and then maybe you have the projections, like the plays from the actual Super Bowl that's being commentated in the background, right? And then you have at the very end where Ron McGill was like, that ram won't survive unless that ram is Cooper Kupp. And then the ram pulls off its costume and then is wearing a Cooper Kupp uniform.
Of course.
Right? Like stuff like that kept popping into my head. I will also say, if I were to stage this, you got to stage this like a football field, right? You have to have the audience on two sides. And I mean, I understand, the crowd is, all around the football field. F you. How about that? The audience, there's a home side and away side, and the audience will be on two sides.
Right.
And it'll be, it'll be designed, it'll be on grass. It'll be painted. There'll be projections on it, though. Of course, you're going to need that. And so, like, the floor will look different here and there, but it's going to be on grass. It's going to be a goddamn football field.
Oh, that's beautiful. I mean, why wouldn't you? Of course. I would make all the walls grass. I would put them in a big grass ball.
Crawl.
And Danny, with your combining words. Now, I think because this is a natural stepping off point into what would we have done, how would we act, how does this actually look, how we stage this, right? But I think before we get to that, I think it would be best if we maybe got a little bit of a word from our resident show musicologist, our good friend Travis Carroll.
The Big Game by the Dan LEBATARD Show is quite possibly the worst piece of art I have ever interacted with in my life. No part of this listening experience was remotely pleasant, and everything about it was cynical and amateurish and poorly executed. The musical arrangements were bland at best, stupid a lot of the times, like just dumb jokes, like Discord in B sharp or whatever it is. Discord in harmony, something like that. Didn't make any sense. Ridiculous, stupid, horrible. I hated it. I thought the political sort of humor at the beginning was weird and out of place, and it really set me up for something very different than what happened, which was, you couldn't grasp any kind of plot from the songs. If there was a plot to this show, deeply cynical, deeply cynical. Hatred, just made fun of sports fans, made fun of sports non-fans, I'm not sure these creators like anything, least of all music. There was the arrangements were so bland, like I said, but the just the production quality was so bad, right? These MIDI tracks with the MIDI choir, like ooh ooh ooh, you know, just very disjointed and horrible sounding. The auto-tune was so bad, and that's the kind of auto-tune that people hate generally, right? When people say they hate auto-tune, they're not talking about T-Pain. Well, some of them are, but they shouldn't be. They're talking about people who not only are not singers, but are clearly not musicians and are very questionably even, like, artistic. Do some kind of ridiculous nonsense like this. I don't even know what this is for. No professional production of this could ever... Right? I'm struggling to find words because my mom told me that if I don't have anything nice to say, I shouldn't say anything at all. The utter contempt that this show has for the listener, however, the gay joke at the end, oh, the big game, huh, who would listen to that? And then that's how it ends? Horrible. I hate it. I hated everything about this experience.
Okay. Wait, no, I should probably say something.
Okay, listen. Folks, we don't know what Travis just said, right? We are recording this, and we you know what? We agree with whatever Travis said. Maybe Travis shit talked this, and I'll agree with him. Maybe Travis loved this to death, and Mac will agree with him. We will agree with Travis, but nevertheless, we could say with confidence he spouted some goddamn wisdom into your minds.
Obviously.
Mac did not know how to transition out of that.
I didn't. Well, because I'm sitting here
thinking
behind
the curtain. Yeah,
it's
no.
True.
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, well, we don't know what Travis said, right? But I kind of wanted to like make it magical.
Sure. Let's fake. Let's just fake of what
okay,
Travis.
fine.
You want to fake
right.
it?
We kind of pride ourselves on like this is what's going on.
You know what? Let's be like, well said, Travis. All right, back to the thing. What were we talking about?
We were talking about what do you do? How do you make this a story?
So,
I mean, first thing we said a couple times already, you need a character.
Yeah.
You need a character that we're following.
Yeah.
Whose problem are we trying to solve?
And this is the thing. You got to write a book around this. You have to write a book around these songs.
These songs cannot stand alone.
Because if these songs just stand alone, it's a concert. It's not a musical.
Right.
So you need a book of some kind. You need some sort of protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
I think the leading individual may be Jessica, who like starts the song "Take Me There," where like she doesn't want to go to LA. I think that's the leading candidate.
Sure, but I think it's only the leading candidate because she's
the only character that it feels like she goes on a journey.
Exactly. Which I like the fact that she goes on a journey, but it also feels a little weird to me because Dan is still bringing such main character energy to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Dan LeBatard show, and he also leads the whole... Right.
Yeah, and he leads it at the very beginning of, like, the NFL is really bleeped up.
Right.
But football.
Exactly, right. And
which is funny and sad, but it's a great way to start the musical, but I'm also frustrated that they didn't call back to the theme again and again.
Okay, what about this? Okay, here's a concept. Give it to me.
Get jiggy with it.
Now, what do you think about... what if Dan LeBatard was a narrator type figure, and this was a tableau type musical?
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
So like kind of an Angels in America where we like, is there a protagonist? If you want to get technical, sure, but we're like seeing different people's experiences of the Super Bowl, right? And then they all come together at the end, kind of like it's suggesting, you know what I mean? But that's just like the most of the book. The meat of the book is Dan LeBatard taking us to and from situations and songs, and like trying to keep them together in some sort of in some sort of theme.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yes. So you can have maybe the very first song, Introduction, which was done by John Skipper, former CEO of ESPN and now CEO of Meadowlark Media.
I didn't know that.
But have like maybe like even something as odd as like the stage manager do that, right? In order to set the scene, and then have the character of Dan LeBatard come on, do his first song, then transitions into like just a scene where like he displays like this cast of characters. He shows the motley crew that we're going to be acclimated with,
right?
And so like he is our bridge to protagonist, right? Like you said, he's not necessarily a protagonist, but that's probably as close as we're going to get, because we can't we can't just write in a protagonist because that protagonist is not really going to be involved with any of these songs. But if we have it sort of presented like Dan is sort of orchestrating this and it being like Fantasia and just like a symphony, putting it all together, all these images, but like it's through the lens of him, I think is probably the way to do it.
Yeah.
And so then you realize towards the end of, I wish I would probably still inject more like dialogue or maybe even another song about like the sort of muddy disgustingness of the NFL and it's all of its controversies, right? All of that just muddying everything and have that more pervasive per se. And so have that in scenes or another song, but then you could see that in juxtaposition to everybody's experience with football, that even with all that, they still consume football like cocaine, right up their nose.
I'm wondering, there's actually a musical that I think is kind of following a similar structure that we are brainstorming right now, and it is a musical called Assassins.
Stephen Sondheim.
It is a Stephen Sondheim musical. You're correct. You're familiar-ish.
Ish.
That's awesome. I'm probably on the same level then. I really only know like 2 songs from that musical.
I don't even know. I think I know one. But point is,
but the general concept of the show is there's a narrator and they are taking you through a look at basically tableaus like we're talking about of different assassins throughout history. Yeah. And them assassinating their famous person. And I think that we could definitely maybe look to that and rip some of that off a little bit to see, you know, maybe it's like the narrator is trying to maybe it's like not a football fan. Maybe it's someone that's like I'm trying to understand like why this is such a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
And like each tableau is like trying to show like this is why we love football, and it's funny because every single tableau is them talking about how much they love football, and then by the end realizing that like it's not really a love relationship, it's like a love-hate relationship, and there's actually a lot of shitty parts.
Because Dan at the beginning is essentially, I hit the mic. Did I hit the mic? I kind of screw it. Just give me a point.
No, we'll see if it reads in the audio.
Okay. But point, this is being contested. This point, by the way. So I think that's a good way to do it, right? With the introduction of Dan being like, you have no reason to like this. The Witching Hour. And like all these games. Yeah. And then it immediately leading into All In of like, wow, football is really exciting. Wait a second. STUGOTZ is in pain because he's a fan of this football team. Oh, football used to be better back then. Wait a second. But the birth of football and the idea of, you know, combat, right? The human nature of fighting against one another. That's what draws us in. And then the high stakes of the playoffs, right? And then the excitement of one individual, the GOAT, turning everything around, right? And then the idea of like, there's this Super Bowl, there's this one big game that's coming up, and everything exciting and thrilling and elaborate that goes into it. And the fact that this big game takes place in Los Angeles, right? And then it's everything at once. Point being, that's a great way to do it.
I'm thinking,
as a non-football fan, being sort of like brought through this with Dan. I think Dan is like still the narrator, but guiding this football fan who doesn't even probably sing maybe until the final song.
Who is the funniest person we could pair Dan LEBATARD with that like would absolutely crush him in terms of like is the total antithesis of his sense of humor and he could not deal with? Like, what would be the funniest person we could possibly pair him with, or like type of person?
It's got to be somebody who's like really, really dry. Yeah, in their humor.
What if it's like an elderly woman?
That's good.
Like a really, really old woman.
Sister Jean.
What?
Sister Jean, she is like a fan of a college basketball team.
Yes.
I just thought of an old lady involved in sports.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yes.
I think there's like something funny about like a 60-year-old woman who only knows sports because like her son was involved and played some growing up, but she doesn't understand it. And so like her son and her husband loves the NFL and loves football. So why should she care? And Sister I think that's Jean, a great way to do it.
Roots for and is practically the mascot for Loyola.
Cool. Good for her.
Just wanted to throw that there.
Prayers up. Salute to her.
Prayers up. I love that. You're right. And I think that would be kind of funny because like every single joke that Dan LEBATARD could possibly make, I think would be very interestingly and hilariously batted down by an elderly woman.
Yeah. And so part of it too, this goes back a little bit to who is this for, is that there are a lot of specific references, right? Like the Evan McPherson joke doesn't really land unless you know who Evan McPherson is.
Right.
Even if the beginning of the song GOAT, you have Chris Cody being like, Evan McPherson, he's a kicker. Like that doesn't, that's like, oh, that's funny, but like hearing the name Evan McPherson, that's the joke right there.
You're right.
And so a lot of this you have to basically, any sort of image, you have to put up there, right? The smallest line of Kyle Brandt's hammies, right? Like you have to show a projection or something of Kyle Brandt and like a giant, like a zoom in of his hamstrings.
You're exactly
right.
correct.
Like it's like stuff like that, like boom, boom, bang, right? That if you're directing this, you have to guide the audience through every little thing so that even if they don't understand it, like who is Dominique, right? It's Dominique Foxworth, but at least if you get an image, then like, oh, okay, so he looks like a sort of like commentator sort of guy who is like an analyst of sorts. Okay, so like he provides info on the Super Bowl. Got it, right? Where like if you're just listening to this, who the fuck is Dominique?
Right.
You know,
right.
So it'd be that. So, but using the apparatus of a character that doesn't know anything about football is a great excuse to do that, because then you think of it exactly, and you think of it as Dan is the one that's showing all of these things to her, and then maybe Dan, you know, in scenes in between is explaining, okay, so like this is what happened in the playoffs, right? And like it ended up being the Rams and the Bengals, and this is a demonstration, blah, blah, blah. Or like, you know, on the Buccaneers, there's this quarterback who's over 40 years old and he still kicks everybody's asses.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that.
Have you ever heard, and I swear to God, this is not a joke. I'm actually trying to make a legitimate point here. Have you ever heard Will Smith talk about what made Fresh Prince a really, really well-written show?
No.
Okay, he was like, the thing that makes Fresh Prince stand out from every other show of its time especially is that it was able to bring audiences together, specifically black and white audiences.
Yeah.
And how it did that is that whenever they were in the writer's room, they had writers from a lot of different backgrounds, and they made sure that every single punchline that that they got the black audience to laugh, the white audience was also laughing, but for a different reason. And even though they were laughing for different reasons, they were laughing at the same time, and everyone loved the show.
And so then it brought together like a sense of community.
Exactly. And even though like over time, you know, like people start to meld they start to find other things funny because the show shows a lot of different perspectives in really interesting and clever ways. But overall, they're consistently making sure that both audiences are being fed. I think that might need to happen a little more here. Maybe they need to have a couple more. You know what I mean?
I'm with you there. That's the key.
Every single time that you give us a joke that a football fan would laugh at, the non-football fan audience should be laughing at the same time, but maybe for a different reason.
Right.
So like, for instance, an excellent example would be John Mulaney whenever he is talking about Law and Order SVU. Super famous jokes that he makes about Law and Order. And the constant joke is that if you have seen Law and Order SVU, you're laughing your ass off because you know what he's saying is so true and is really funny observational comedy. But because it's such well-crafted observational comedy, if you've never seen the show at all, it's still hilarious because even imagining the absurd things that pictures he's painting is really clever. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I'm with you there exactly. Probably the best example of that, I keep bringing this song up, but I think the song is such a great example for so many things. Discordant Harmony number 2, where like this man is singing the Jets and that's all he's saying, and that shit's hilarious. Only if you know what the Jets have been for the past 20 years. Right. You know, so like what you have to do for that is that you have to put up images of like Jets finals record, of like Mark Sanchez doing the butt fumble, of like all these awful plays, and like he's singing at that, like he's witnessing all of that. That would be the joke for the individuals who don't understand like what it is, and then the joke for like the football fan in the room, which will probably be only like 2 people, because why would football fans be watching this musical?
Sure, right.
I can't imagine baseball fans went and saw Damn Yankees, but
you're right. That's a very good point.
but like for the football fans, like it's just funny that like yes, exactly. Of course he's wailing about the Jets. You know, that is a wonderful, wonderful way to sort of illustrate that. Let's also mention the fact that like because of the production and because this was more focused really to be an album than it is a musical, the transitions between the songs, it feels like for some of them, there's no room for like any sort of scene to fit in between. They like flow beautifully together, sure, but you can't inject a scene into, best example, Back in My Day into New American Pathos, right? Where Back in My Day is being done, and then all of a sudden New American Pathos starts, and it's actually Back in My Day is being played on the radio. You know? That's so like how first of all, I mean, I don't even know how I would do that transition, but like just stylistically, if you were to hold yourself to that, how would you, what kind of story can you fit in between there?
Right.
You can't.
Right.
And so then that's another thing that's like holding you back from like telling the overall story of this entire piece. It's that's a thing that is consistent throughout this. Like I said, I love the transitions. If you try to do a production of this, good freaking luck trying to, you know, cut away at those transitions.
I am wondering, though, I think that because you were talking about being able to see it as a staged piece, in my mind, whenever I've watched, like whenever I was listening to it, I was actually imagining it more as like a film setting. Like I could see really very clear and funny images in the in like film aspects.
The 2-minute warning is
folks.
here.
2-minute warning, Danny. Give it to us. What were your final thoughts on this piece?
I really enjoyed it. I did really enjoy it. I had no expectations, and I think that's part of the reason why I enjoyed it. I think because it was overproduced, I actually thought that was the funny part. There are some songs in there I legitimately enjoy. I still occasionally go back and listen to the damn thing. And I think probably the biggest compliment, and I should have said this on the front end, Mac, if we were still in college, I would have lobbied to do this show in some capacity.
You're so right.
Like some shitty iteration of this show.
That would have been
have
so fun.
loved to put this on stage. I would have had a blast.
Would you have directed it?
Fantastic. I would have co-directed it.
Good.
I wouldn't have directed it.
Oh man.
But I would have a say in the room. It's definitely something that I was listening to it, and I had the thought, I wish I was still in college because that would have been the great opportunity to do this for real, and it would have been so much fun. Mac.
And I think Dan LeBatard would have loved it as well. Like I kept thinking to myself, like, you know, if this was actually be staged or filmed or anything like that, I think that Dan LeBatard and the show would find that hilarious and would so promote that. You know what I mean? Like I don't think they'd be salty about like rights or anything like that. So I think that it was an enjoyable time. I understand why someone would like it, absolutely, 100%. And I understand that there's 100% an audience for it. There's just a lot of things that kind of confused me, and that not necessarily jokes. Like I understood the jokes, but just like the way that they went about making this whole thing and putting it together, it was I was uncomfortable and didn't quite understand sometimes, and so that was difficult for me. But I can totally understand why Danny or really any football fan would especially like this and would think this is fun and interesting. Now, Danny, in terms of our piece for next week, what we are doing, we are going to be watching a little movie. That is in one of my favorite movies of all time, and I would put it on the same tier as Parasite, yeah, in terms of its greatness and its impact. And we next week are going to be watching Get Out.
Get out!
Get out!